What's up everyone, my name's Zane and welcome to my results from 10 hours of killing Adamant dragons with range. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight into it because this one is a doozy. So as you can see, this is the loot that we got from the 10 hours and you may note that it's worth 29.3 mil. And let's just start off by immediately stressing that that would not be the average experience. I got super lucky while doing these. You can see I've got 528 dragon bones, that's how many kills we got, and that most of the loot is just a variety of decent, semi-valuable to valuable items, with the drop table being quite similar to rune dragons for a lot of different things. But as you can see at the bottom left, we got 2 dragon limbs, which pulled up the average value of our loot tab massively. Overall, our normal loot came out to a value of about 12 mil, whereas the dragon limbs brought up the value by over 17 mil in extra loot. So do just keep that in mind if you are to do this yourself. With that said, there's only so many ways that I can say that I'm stupidly lucky, so let's go ahead and get into the stats. So to start things off with the experience, the main thing to stress about this is that it's very mediocre experience to below average. It's not very good as a training method, you certainly wouldn't want to come here to train, and this is very similar to rune dragons actually in that regard. In terms of the loot, I'd first draw your attention to the supply cost just briefly, because that's about 4 mil higher than the supply cost you'd get if you were using melee. Basically, range for me does a lot more damage, I have much better gear for range, so it makes more sense for me to use it. But just keep in mind if you are going to use range like me, it will bump up your supply cost quite significantly. But in my case, it's worth it because I get so many more kills. Obviously in terms of the loot and the actual profit, this is incredible. It's very similar actually to Vorkath ironically. But on average, you'd expect much closer over a very long period of time of about 1.2 to 1.3 mil maybe, which is assuming you're using ranged, and I'll get into those calculations in just a moment. In terms of the additional stats, we obviously got 528 kills, we averaged 53 per hour, which is pretty impressive, it's faster than rune dragons. Part of that is because adamant dragons have lower defenses, and part of it is because one of the special abilities of adamant dragons actually damages them themselves, which lets you get more kills, even if your experience rates aren't that much higher. And one stat I did record for this was the bolts used, so you could get a rough idea of how much it would cost you if you put in the bolts that you'd use here to do this for 10 hours. In my case, again, it came out to around 4 mil. But maybe the most important stat that I'd really like to underline here is one that I came up with after doing a bit of maths, which is that if you add up the value of all the rares that you get on average over 10,000 kills, which is to say if you were to camp these for 200 hours with average luck, then it would add an average value of 685k per hour to your loot, which means that this method with ranged, assuming you get the same kills as me, would pull in around 1.2 to 1.3 mil over a very long period of time when all of the things average out. And for those of you who are wondering how we work that out, we basically get the average value of the loot per hour, which would be 1.2 mil. We take away the average supply cost per hour with range, which is around 665k, and then we add back in the average value of 685k in rare loot that you'd get overall, which basically means that you cancel out the supply cost altogether and just count the normal loot as your average overall profit. So it would come out to 1.2 to 1.3 mil. I do just want to stress though that whilst you would average a profit of around 1.2 to 1.3 mil an hour doing these over a very long period of time, in the short term you're very unlikely to hit that. And if anything, what this video shows is that it can go either way. In my case, I was incredibly lucky and far above the average, in fact, pretty much double the average, but in other cases, you're going to get well below the average. And while the loot for this was obviously an incredibly positive experience for me, the actual method wasn't. To discuss it briefly, adamant dragons are a pain in the butt to kill. They have a special ability that goes through your prayer completely, and whilst it does damage them, it guaranteed damages you as well. So you have to keep your health low because it's a Ruby Bolt E special effect basically, which then puts you in the risk of dying by getting comboed out by the dragon. They also have a poison pool special ability which basically requires you to constantly be moving, because while you can tank it, every time you do it basically does around 20 damage, which really adds up over several trips. Basically the two special abilities of the adamant dragons unfortunately mean that they're not an ideal monster to camp because they require a lot of attention and a lot of input from the player in order to do effectively. And again, very similar to rune dragons, I found that you need a lot of initial gear and a lot of money for the supply cost initially in order to do it effectively again. So these aren't something that you'd want to camp if you're incredibly poor, and if you're incredibly wealthy and in the end game, you'd want to skip these altogether because brutal black dragons are easier, and Vorkath is about the same effort but with much more consistent rewards. So to just briefly summarise all of the findings that I got from this video, here's what I found. First of all, they're mediocre to below average experience. They're a difficult monster to kill in large quantities, very similar to rune dragons in that regard actually. They're not AFKable at all due to their 2 special abilities. With average luck, you'd pull in a profit of 1.2 to 1.3 mil in the long term. And based on the average luck, these are a fine Slayer monster to kill. Obviously they're very short tasks, but they're incredibly bad for late game long term camping for the effort required. And finally, based on my luck, they are the best thing since sliced bread apparently. But with all of that said, that is it for this video, so I do hope you enjoyed and found it helpful. And as always, if there is anything you'd like to see me cover, feel free to drop me a line down below and I will do my best to make it happen. And on that note, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Bayrad. Thank you for the suggestion for this video and I do hope you enjoyed. So with that said, that's it from me. Hope you're all having a nice day and I will see you all next time. Bye guys!